What's up, Ragin Nation? My name is Alex. You're watching the Ragin Ronin review. In this video, I will be reviewing Dredd, also known as Dredd 3D. This movie is not to be confused with Judge Dredd, which came out in 1995 starring Sylvester Stallone. Both movies have the same title character in them, but this one, called Dredd, is a hell of a lot better. This movie is based off a comic book series called 2000 AD, and it takes place in a dark post-apocalyptic future where the Earth is an irradiated wasteland called the Cursed Earth, and on the east coast of North America you have this dystopian metropolis called Megacity 1. And Megacity 1 is this huge megacity that is walled off, and it has a population of 800 million people, and it is a very crime-ridden city. In fact, there are 17,000 crimes committed on a daily basis. So to counter these crimes, they have these law enforcers called judges. And what they basically are policemen who have the power to execute on site. They're the judge, the jury, and executioner all rolled up in one. And in a nutshell, the story is that Judge Dredd and his rookie trainee, Judge Anderson, need to survive and fight their way out of a 200-story housing block called the Peach Trees. But the Peach Trees is controlled by a crime lord known as Mama, and Mama controls the manufacturing and distribution of an epidemic drug called slow-mo. Slow-mo, which when consumed will slow your brain processing to 1% of its normal speed. So you process information at slow motion, and that sounds like a pretty cool drug. So with the characters, you have Judge Dredd played by Carl Urban, Judge Anderson played by Olivia Thirlby, Kay played by Wood Harris, and Mama played by Lena Headey. All the performances for every single one of these actors is on point. The bottom of Carl Urban's nose and his mouth and chin do a very good job in the portrayal of the title character. In fact, I think that fans will be very pleased by his performance. He is Judge Dredd. He shows off how cold and emotionless Judge Dredd really is, and that's all you really need from this character. He just has to be good at what he does, and that is enforcing the law and also being completely emotionless in doing it. And then you have Judge Anderson played by Olivia Thirlby, who is the mutant rookie trainee. And she's a mutant because her mutation gives her the ability to read minds. So she's telepathic. How she became a mutant, it's never really explored. What's great about the character of Judge Anderson is that she provides the heart and soul in the story. Judge Dredd is completely cold and emotionless, so Judge Anderson actually provides that balance. One thing I like about Judge Anderson's character was that she never wears a helmet. And the reason for that is that a helmet would limit her telepathic abilities. For a storytelling point of view, that works. From a directorial point of view, it actually works even better. Because like I said before, Judge Anderson is actually the heart and soul for the story. In fact, the two judges, Dredd and Anderson, they act as one. And for us to connect with the main characters, we as an audience need to see Judge Anderson's face. Because her face is a representation of innocence, good, and reason. And I'm pretty sure that director P. Travis meant for this. And then there's Kay played by Wood Harris, who is the bad guy henchman that is the link between the judges and Mama. And his role for the story is actually the catalyst for the character development in Judge Anderson. So the interaction between Kay and Judge Anderson actually helps her understand herself and the situation that they're in and the concept of being a judge. And finally, you have Mama played by Lena Headey, and she is a ruthless, feared crime lord. In fact, she's the type of character that you've seen in a lot of other movies where there's a really feared crime lord. You know, at the end of the day, that they're all just human and that they can be killed just as easily as any other human, but they're very feared. She's a type of character where when she says to throw someone out the window, you do just that. And when she wants someone skinned alive, you get those skinning tools ready. And that's the story and characters for you. And I don't want to say much more about the story because it's very simple and I want to keep it simple when doing my review. This makes for some very linear storytelling, which is a breath of fresh air because it's not a movie that's full of all these little subplots. Now let's talk about the direction in the movie. P. Travis's vision for 2000 AD provides for a very contemporary future. It feels like the distant future because you see these huge megacity building structures which are enormous that stretch on for miles and miles, all contained by these massive city walls that protect itself from the cursed earth. But it still feels contemporary because when you're on street level, you don't see anything that much out of the ordinary. You still see cars and people, and it just appears more like it's the ghetto, you know, it's kind of like the slums. But the future is not over the top. There's no flying cars. There are no cars that look really futuristic. The buildings aren't completely lit up with huge neon signs and massive animating billboards and holograms. It still feels like this could be the Earth maybe 10 or 20 years later. But I like this realistic take on the 2080 universe. And the realism also translates to all the elements that make a Judge Dredd movie. For example, the vehicles. The judges drive something called the Lawmaster, and it doesn't look totally futuristic. It really looks like an armored motorcycle. Now, the costume for the judges in the comics consisted of this one-piece black body-hugging suit, which also had boots and a crotch guard, the helmet, of course, and these gold shoulder blocks. One side is in the shape of an eagle. It just looks ridiculous when translated into a real world situation. It's not practical, and most importantly, it's not functional. So they changed all that, and they changed it for the better. The helmet stays the same, and it actually looks better than the Stallone version, because in the Stallone version it's very clean and it's very new looking. In Dredd, it's roughed up, it's been weathered, and you know that they've seen some serious action. The shoulder pads aren't these huge giant golden eagles. He's not wearing that skin tight one-piece suit. It actually feels like a bulky cop uniform with the helmet on, and it looks really cool. And most importantly, it's functional and it works. And speaking of the action is very violent, and that is probably the best thing about this movie. This is definitely a body count movie. The grotesque violence in this movie is what makes this movie great. In a time where we're so used to seeing these watered down action movies where they just tone down the violence just to bring in a wider audience, Pete Travis's vision is very brave in the sense that he doesn't care what other people think. This is the way that a live action Judge Dredd movie should be like. Some people might think of it as violence overkill, but I would have to say that it's kind of like what makes a John Woo movie poetic. John Woo makes gunplay like poetry, and Pete Travis made a slow-mo death scene artistic. And I find that every action scene is directed with perfection. It is violent, it is brutal, and it really gives you a very raw and visceral idea of what living in Mega City 1 is like. Another thing that I like to mention about the action is that there are no real big action sequences. It's just a whole bunch of random small action sequences. You would expect the action sequences for a movie like this to have boss fights. And what I mean is that you'd have some substantial type of bad guy character that the judges have to take out, but it's a challenge for them. You don't get any of that. In fact, it's just the judges fighting off really weak henchmen. And I didn't really have a problem with that. And the reason for that is while the sequence was short, it was still very violent, and that is what made it satisfying. Every single one of those kills was like a fatality in Mortal Kombat. So in that sense, all the action sequences, while they're not that big, were very satisfying. Another thing that I liked about the movie is the music. Now, it's not actual music that is iconic or that you will remember. There's no hero theme. What it really is kind of like an industrial theme. Like, it's just some noise like this. It's just this recurring noise that they go through in these hallways at the peach trees. And when you hear it as they're walking around these hallways, it just feels very cold, and it really creates the atmosphere for the hostile situation that they're in. So what they did with the music was absolutely perfect. Now let's talk about the 3D in the film. The movie is called Dredd 3D for a reason, and that is because this movie looks beautiful in 3D. There's only a small handful of movies that look great in 3D. Hugo, Avatar, Transformers Dark of the Moon. You could put Dredd 3D in that list. In fact, a lot of the scenes look good when they're really wide shots of the setting that they're in. Like when they're walking through the hallways, you really feel the depth of the scene. But the best time you see the 3D in effect is when you watch those slow-mo scenes. When they consume the drug slow-mo and then you see the effects of it, it looks beautiful in 3D. And I think that's one of the reasons why they have slow-mo as a drug. We all know that 3D is a gimmick. And if you really think about it, the drug being slow-mo is a gimmick. It could have been any other drug with any other kind of side effect, but the fact that it is a drug called slow-mo, which makes you see everything in slow motion, makes it so convenient for the 3D to look great. And I don't have a problem with that. It's gimmicky, but it completely works. Now, I said a lot of great things about this movie, but I have two small things that could have given it a better score than I'm about to give it. One of the main things is that this is a movie that takes place in the distant future. It is really a shame that 85% of this movie takes place inside a building, and we can't really see what this future is like. I actually wanted to see what's it like outside of the peach trees. You have miles and miles of Mega City out there. but we didn't see very much of it. So that's something that kind of bothered me a little bit. I understand they wanted to keep this movie simple, and they did, and it worked. But a part of me wanted to see what it's like outside of the peach trees. The other thing that I felt could have been better was something that happened at the end. I don't want to spoil anything, so if you want to know what that is, stay tuned for my spoiler talk video for Dredd 3D, and I'll let you know exactly what I'm talking about. Other than that, I give this movie an 8 out of 10, recommended to be watched in 3D. It is a great movie, and I absolutely loved it. My name is Alex Yu, and thanks for watching the Ragin Ronin review. I'll see you next time. Peace. What the future looks like, but we didn't really get that. And the other thing they could have improved was something that I didn't want to mention in my movie review because it's kind of spoilerific.